Welcome to Thinking Like a Lawyer with your hosts Elie and Joe Patrice, talking about legal news and pop culture, all while thinking like a lawyer. Here on Legal Talk Network.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice, and with me, as always, is Elie Mystal.
The sun came out. The sun actually came out.
It did, and I can officially report now that it is the hottest day on record in New York City for this particular calendar day.
That's the BS. This is going to be one of those seasons where, like, you go from winter to summer with no spring.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like it. I mean, before we start off, we should acknowledge that once again we're sponsored by Major Lindsay in Africa, so thank you to them. The
whoop whoop
legal search firm is sponsoring this podcast. So now we will lead into Elie telling us about what's irritating him right at the moment.
So at the moment, one of the things that's in my inbox for me to have to deal with is next week is Family Share Day at my 5-year-old school for our family. So Family Share Day, it's a little bit like it's half show and tell, half bring your daddy to school day, where you have to go with your family and share something that's like important to your family with the whole class. All right, it's a super, we go to one of these like ritzy, progressive, private schools, so great, all about sharing. So we're kind of late in the schedule, and when I was told about this, I obviously said, well, my wife's from Zimbabwe, so I was like, well, we're going to share something about Zimbabwe to like teach all these other white kids some truths about the world. And we were quickly informed with, oh, well, that's interesting, but another family just did South Africa, so maybe something. And I was like, the white South African family? And they were like, uh-huh. I was like, well, how's that? Like, that doesn't count. That is... So my wife basically punched me and didn't let me kind of go off on that track until we went home, at which point I was pretty annoyed that the white South African family got to talk about Africa, but the black Zimbabwean family doesn't get to talk about because it's already been done. I don't think that's right. At which point, my wife reminded me that I am not from Africa.
No, but you could have shared all that you know about the wilds of Long Island.
Right, that I have. She suggested more kindly than you are that I have a little bit of a lack of credibility on this particular topic, which then made me feel like, well, all right, well, my ancestry is from Haiti.
That would actually be a very interesting thing.
And, kids like sugar.
Yeah.
Let's tell them where that comes from. Huh? Yeah. Let's tell them about the blood and sweat and tears that went into their Fruit Loops.
And I think that's exactly what 5-year-olds are looking for, is that kind of a layout.
My wife's suggestion is that we teach the kids how to sing Alligator's Old Top Hat, which is one of their favorite nursery rhymes, and read a Scaredy Squirrel story.
That seems certainly much more appropriate to the age, but, do you.
So what I have to choose for next week is the history of sugar production in Haiti or Scaredy Squirrel. Which way would you go?
I mean, I'd probably go with Haiti, but that's also this also brings us back to why I don't have kids, and most of human society is happy about that.
Raising woke children is difficult. The struggle is real.
I mean, hey, but you say that as if you sound like a guy who's not read Scaredy Squirrel. So that's fascinating. You want to?
If you guys
feel comfortable now?
Look, after you hear the episode, if you want to like tweet at me and vote which way I should go, I'll be taking suggestions.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. So at Elie NYC, tweet at him whether he should talk to children about the only successful slave revolt in history or Scaredy Squirrel.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I'll vote first.
I think it's going to be a close one.
It could be. So, all right. Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back. Wondering what lies ahead on the road to success? Whether you're looking to advance your legal career or grow your legal team, Major Lindsay in Africa can help you navigate the legal landscape. With more than 35 years of experience in legal recruiting, Major Lindsay helps law firms and legal departments thrive in today's ever-changing market and matches lawyers and legal professionals with opportunities where they can flourish. Learn more at mlaglobal.com. And we're back. So, you have kids. I don't. But we're going to be talking all about kids today, of a sort.
Or at least creating them.
Yes, more the creating them part. Our guest today is Ellen Trachman. She's the managing attorney of the Trachman Law Center in Denver. And she specializes in assisted reproductive technology law, adoption, and estate planning. She also is a columnist at Above the Law, which is a website that I would hope everyone listening reads. And,
or has at least heard of.
And she has a podcast, which is I Want to Put a Baby in You, which is the best possible name for a podcast about this subject. So welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. And I think I should start by voting. So yeah. I definitely vote for Haiti as long as it comes with giving the kids sugar, because parents, teachers, everyone really appreciates that, and the kids especially. So
exactly
go
right.
Haiti.
So yeah, a lot of what we do on this show strays from this core concept. But the core concept of the show is to talk to lawyers who have interesting practices that people coming out of law school wouldn't necessarily think that's a thing I could do with my law degree. So tell us a little bit about the assisted reproductive game.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And at first, I will have to say my goals for being on the podcast. Initially, I want to promote my own podcast, which talks about assisted reproductive technology. But then I listened to some of your episodes, and I decided my other goal coming on here has to be to give people hope. If they're at a little law school like Emory or something that you guys bag on, and say that there is a hope for your future. Know that. So you should know that. It's okay. You can have a future. But yes, okay. So I was a big law attorney myself back in the day. I worked for Sidley Austin doing hedge fund work. But I stumbled across this area of assisted reproductive technology law, which is the longest title possible for an area of law. And we shorten it to art law, which is really awkward because then people are like, oh, paintings. And that's not what it is. It's, making babies without sex. But anyway, so most of it
painting
is
on the canvas of the womb.
Yes. Yes. Good.
Yeah.
With gametes and but yeah. So most of what I do is contract work with arrangements with third-party reproduction. So if you have to use an egg donor or a sperm donor or using a surrogate, and then there's some court work too, because if you have a surrogate, the law assumes, sometimes wrongly, that the woman who's giving birth is the legal mother of that child. And with surrogacy, that's not the case. We have to go and get a court order that overrides that and says, no, she's, the caregiver for these 9 months, but really it's these other people that are the parents. Aside from that, it's just really an incredibly fascinating area of law. As you mentioned, I write a column, and there is news every day, just like crazy stories in this area where gametes are mixed up and doctors are using their own sperm against their patient's knowledge, and embryos are being given to a 2-year-old to decide what to do with his quote unquote siblings later. And so it's hard to, sometimes with a column I have to decide which crazy news story to write on each week.
Well, if we can focus on one crazy news story, just because it was one of the most gangbusters stories of Above the Law all last year, the situation where you have two siblings, twins, as the case was, who are citizens of different countries.
Yes. The Josh Banks case is what you're referring to. That was pretty big last year and is still a current case. So this sweet couple. So Andrew Banks before he got married. Okay, so this man from California met the love of his life while he was in Israel, but unfortunately gay marriage was not permitted there. So they moved to Canada, where he was a dual citizen. They got married, lived happily ever after by deciding to have twin children. And in that process, they used an egg donor, and they fertilized half the eggs with one of their sperm and half with the other. And this is actually fairly common with gay couples who choose to have children by surrogacy. And then they transferred 2 embryos, and they got lucky that they both took. And so the surrogate gave birth to healthy twins, genetically related to each one of them, but then half siblings to each other by the egg donor, same egg donor. Right. So eventually they decide that they want to move back to LA, and they go before the U.S. Immigration Office, and they said, okay, these are our children. And under Canadian law, they were both on the birth certificate, so they're both the parents by Canadian law.
They're both the parents of both children.
Of both children, yes. So they're both parent 1, parent 2 for both children equally, regardless of genetic connection. No identifying genetic connection for any child. But when they go to this immigration office, the immigration officer decides to exercise their discretion to ask for DNA testing. So, I mean, I guess they are tipped off that there could be a DNA issue because there's two dads, possibly. I don't know. But anyway, discrimination. That's
profiling.
So, right? So they do, they come back with DNA testing, which of course shows that the U.S. citizen was only genetically related to one child. And so U.S. immigration decides to grant U.S. citizenship to one of the twins and not to the other. So, Andrew was coming for his job, and he had to come start his job, and his husband came with him, and the second baby, his other baby came with him on a visitor's visa. And I think that's now expired, but they filed a case now to try to fight it. So,
wow.
Yeah, our country can be disgusting sometimes.
So much craziness.
One of my questions is, from a big law perspective, you said you used to work at Sidley.
I did.
This comes up a lot in the big law context with women who are career-oriented, pushing for a partner. Pushing for law partner, not necessarily pushing for life partner. And they get to, a point where they're trying to figure out, should they freeze their eggs? Should they, how they can, what's the best way of putting it? How they can extend their fertility. Do you have, I guess, so question one is kind of like, when do you need to kind of start thinking of that? And then two, kind of more importantly, like, what are some of the pitfalls that people in that situation kind of could easily avoid if they were kind of thinking about it more clearly?
Right. Okay. So let me give the disclaimer. Of course, I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. So
Right,
you should definitely talk to your doctor. They'll give you the real medical advice. But also kind of like the understanding from the lawyer's point of view is that, as women, we have all these eggs. And, they actually say we have millions, but apparently by the time you reach 12 or 13, you really only have like 100,000 left. It's like, you don't have millions by that point already. But so they quickly go downhill in the numbers and quality. And by the time you're in your 30s, they're going fast. So I know that doctors would prefer that you froze them in your 20s to have really healthy eggs. And I think then, 33, 34, like those are still good. And then once you start getting above 35, 36, 37, it all starts going down in quality. So, I mean, obviously the earlier the better is what a doctor would probably recommend. There are, of course, big companies that they'll pay for their employees to do this. Like Facebook has that as a benefit. But I think the big pitfall is that it's a probabilities game. That yes, having eggs retrieved and cryopreserving them is good and offers you this chance of lengthening your fertility and how long you're able to have healthy children. But like we saw last month, there was like a big meltdown of a tank in San Francisco and also one in Cleveland where they just lost thousands and thousands of people's genetic material of all these embryos and eggs. So one, they could lose your eggs. That happens apparently a lot. And then two, like you just don't know. That I've definitely read these stories of people who went through egg freezing thinking like this is kind of my guarantee, my backup, and then none of those worked out for them. I think go into it like with an open mind that yes, like it can really help and it can be this great tool, but it's not guaranteed.
There was a meltdown and a tank? Like what kind of recovery can you expect if they lose your eggs? I mean,
oh my God, you don't read my articles, do you? You're showing that you don't read my column. I am hurt.
Elie does not do any of the editing, really.
Wow,
I
that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use a comma.
Yeah, no,
Fair
and that's
enough.
a really tough question. Well, I've written many articles on this, and I definitely recommend people should read Above the Law and read my column about assisted reproductive technology. So it was a major coincidence that these two different facilities lost thousands and thousands of gametes and embryos in the same day. And that's a really hard problem where there's been these cases where judges don't want to rule in favor of people who've lost gametes because they don't know how to understand what they are and what the value is, and they don't want to do wrongful death because that's really, it wasn't a baby, what are we saying embryos are? And so I've actually done a couple of features on this professor in San Diego, Dove Fox, who's written a lot about reproductive negligence and how the courts are kind of moving towards this understanding that doctors and clinics should be responsible for negligent acts like this, and there should be significant recovery depending on the situation. So, but it's a complex calculation of what that recovery should look like, and you should definitely check out the articles.
Yeah, I'd imagine the people in that freezing game, if they're smart, are going to start moving towards having all manner of releases and so on being signed, I would think, because they'd want to protect themselves from any risk of a power outage screwing them, and legally, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think most of them already do have fairly extensive consent forms that you're signing, and the question is, to what extent is a court going to honor that?
Right.
But I will say, since I'm talking to men, we did just have a sperm bank director on, and she was really encouraging that all men should preserve their sperm as well for quality. So, Joe, I know you don't have kids yet, but maybe you should think about it just in case.
Yeah. Again, I think The Hague does not think that it's a good idea for me to have kids. So.
No, but that is actually an important point. And again, none of us are doctors here, but if you're stuck in kind of 1970s science, you might not think that it's important. But the emergent science is that while men are arguably fertile for kind of as long as they want to be, the quality and the healthiness of your sperm does deteriorate over time and with age. So that if you want your kind of healthiest, you're not that biologically different. If you want your kind of healthiest reproductive cells, you should kind of get them while they're young.
On you, maybe.
Yeah.
I already have my kids. I'm trying to argue for a vasectomy up in here.
Well, and that's interesting. So this other kind of scenario keeps arising across the world in the United States, where someone, so you have a partner or you're married and one of you dies, and the survivor's like, we were planning on having kids. Can we retrieve their sperm or their eggs? And obviously we have the technology to do that now.
But you're dead.
The question is is consent there? And most people are trying to well, we were married. That was the plan. So, Elie, I think you should probably sign a form just in case you die. To say if your wife wants more, that you should just authorize it. Might as well, right? It's
Time
the
out
right thing to do
and
for her.
Back up. There are people that argue for necrophiliatic reproductive cell donations. That's an actual thing that somebody will go into a court and say I should be able to take the reproductive cells out of my dead partner so that I can have the child that we had planned on before the untimely death.
Yeah. So no one goes to court arguing for necrophilia that I know of, but post-mortem retrieval and posthumous conception is definitely a thing. And I mean, even Colorado, we have a provision in our probate code that says you can inherit. So my child can inherit from me as long as that child was conceived within 36 months of my death and born within 45 months of my death. So if you had my eggs, this child can still inherit from me.
Oh, that transitions to an interesting other part of the practice, which is the whole estate planning part, because this raises all those issues. And one of the most interesting ones, the one you just said, that it's 45 months or whatever to get in on the inheritance game.
Before you go there, can I just ask this post-mortem egg retrieval or sperm retrieval? I don't know why it has that. That really freaks me out, but.
Yeah.
As it's been applied so far, has it only been applied to spouses? For instance, could your sister get your other sisters? You know what I'm saying?
So there is a case in Israel where I think they have much stronger feelings about kind of bloodlines and legacy, biological legacy, where this 17-year-old girl was crossing the street and got hit by a car, and her parents argued to have her eggs posthumously post-mortem egg retrieval and have her ovaries retrieved in order that they could have a biological continuation, and they won that case.
But what?
Some people feel very strongly about the continuation of your bloodline.
Your 17-year-old daughter.
Maybe check with your spouse, sign the consent form, just in case she feels strongly about your bloodline. I don't know the quality of your DNA, but she might feel strongly about it.
Very low. But you're saying 17-year-old girl dies, parents argue to and successfully post-mortemly retrieve her eggs so they can find some other random sperm donor and then find and then have a biological granddaughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be their ward, because if it's just a random sperm donor, it's not going to be.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That seems wrong to me.
Well,
this is where people feel differently about this area. People have a lot of strong feelings about different parts of it. I mean, even older. I mean, there's a lot of parts that are pretty controversial, like that, or older parents. Having, if you're a couple in your 60s, can you use assisted reproductive technology to have a child? Is that unethical to bring a child so late? Or is that a problem of inequality because men can have kids at 80 and we don't, bat an eye?
Man, I don't think you should be allowed to buy a dog after you're 65, man. That's just mean to the dog. Like, I don't... See, this is, and Joe's laughing at me right now. Like, he knows that there's this, I come off as this, like, kind of crazy, progressive, liberal person. It does not take much to pull that kind of sheen off of me and get to my true conservative heart.
And really, like, to back it up, to be fair, like, these are kind of like the outlier cases. I mean, most people really are your average couple who just have infertility issues and turn to assisted reproductive technology or a donor or a surrogate just to have a child to get to the same place that anyone else would be. So, these are really the outliers. Most people are just regular people who really want a child.
Exactly. Most of it is not, I was going to sound like a conservative again. Most of it is just an equality kind of thing. Like, there's the random happenstance of biology, and we have the technology that we don't have to be beholden to it in that stage. I was going to say, it's corrective in this kind of field. But these outlier cases are not corrective. They're I would argue unnatural, right? Like they're pushing the limits of what we're supposed to be able to do into this, like, why aren't you with me on this?
I mean, look, basically, since we talked about the posthumous thing, all I've been doing is trying to figure out how the rule against perpetuities works now. That's really all I've been doing. It's totally blinded me.
Yeah. No, and it kind of surprised me. So in addition to my law firm, I co-own a surrogacy matching and support agency where we help kind of pair people who need a surrogate with someone who's qualified to be a surrogate. And when I started, I really thought it was going to be, 90% gay men couples because, they don't have a uterus and it's kind of by default. But really, I found it's like 9/10 heterosexual couples with infertility who aren't even old. They're just infertility is like really common.
Right.
It's like 1 in 8.
Wow. So to get to the inheritance a little bit, but staying on the natural thing.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yes, your question.
Could you inherit genetic material from somebody else? I can't imagine why you would want to do that.
Yes, you can.
Since we're talking about
lots of fascinating. Oh, you should also. I wrote this law review article about posthumous and postmortem conception, which you should read because it answers this. It was published in Savannah Law School, which unfortunately just is no longer there. But
the
anyway,
paper still exists.
So there was this big case. I think it's the Hecht case in California where this man, he gave sperm. He cryopreserved his sperm, and he specifically wanted it to go to his girlfriend, and he committed suicide. And in his suicide note, even he was like, to those children I haven't had, I've dreamed of you, and I, wish you all the best. He had like very clear intentions about giving her the sperm, his intentions that it be used, and his ex-wife and his 2 existing children fought against her receiving this and being able to use it. And they won on the trial level, but she appealed, the girlfriend appealed, and she won that, yes, you can inherit gametes and that people can pass on to their beneficiaries as they choose. And even there was the 2-year-old case I referenced where there was a case in Texas, and this couple went through IVF and they were successful and they were able to have a child, and they had 11 remaining cryopreserved embryos that they hadn't decided if they were having more kids or what they were doing. But when the child was only 2, they were tragically murdered. And this probate court had to look at, what am I going to do with these 11 embryos? And that probate judge decided that, well, embryos, they have some value, so they're like property, and therefore they should pass to the beneficiary, and that's his son. And so he specifically ruled that these embryos go to this 2-year-old child, and he said to decide what to do with them when he is 18 years of age. Meaning, when he turns 18, he has the burden to decide, do I bring my siblings into being? Which I argue is not a good ruling. The parents should have had to specifically have consented to the use of their gametes after their death, which was not the case. But that wasn't how the judge saw it.
That's horrific.
Right?
That sets up the kind of dystopian future where you're bringing things into existence to basically be kind of a spare part for your body, right? That's
what kids are now, right?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like where you can
Oh.
I mean, that's what the spare is for. That's what the second kid is for.
Fair enough.
See, I have 4, so I was like, I need a couple extra spares.
You never know. Somebody might need an eye. If you got 4 around, you're gonna be. But yeah, you can now bring in so. Let's say the 2-year-old grows up and he's got whatever, needs a kidney, and he's like, oh, make me a sister to give me a kidney.
You can't really take a baby kidney, so it probably wouldn't be that situation. But I hear you.
You could certainly drink enough by the age of 18 to know that you're going to need.
And that's actually so. I don't come across that in my daily life, but that is actually a real thought process. And in Europe, there's a lot of legal framework about whether you can do pre-genetic diagnosis or testing on embryos. And there are many countries that kind of ban doing certain testing or doing specifically sex selection. So choosing which sex you're going to implant. But then they have these exceptions, which they call the save your sibling exception, where that's to test for certain things that might be able to help a pre-existing child, that you can do certain testing. So they definitely, that is something that comes into consideration.
Wow. Well,
I got nothing.
So I guess this is where we should.
Doctors shouldn't just ask if they could; they should ask if they should.
Right. Yeah. That's the old Patton Oswalt routine about this. Yeah. So I guess this is a good opportunity to address the Emory question. To change gears. So I guess the real issue with Emory...
You too can go into a fascinating area of law.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess our issue with Emory is not so much that it's not a good school, is that whenever we're in a position where we're being asked, should I go to Emory or insert other school here, we almost always find ourselves in a situation where Emory is so much more expensive than insert school X, and we're always given, if you're saying Yale's that much more expensive, we're I guess you do that. But we're always Emory's just expensive enough that I'd prefer to go to the other one, is what I've always said.
If it's Emory or a state school and the person wants to work in the state school is going to be offering that person, the person who can get into Emory, the state school is going to be offering that person almost a full ride, right? And Emory is going to be...
And you had another question. So I went to Berkeley for undergrad, and you had another question that was someone had a ton of money to go to Berkeley and less to go to Chicago and Penn, and I was Berkeley, obviously, but that was not your take.
Right. Well, because that's the other side of it, right? So then we get in. So the classic Emory problem is the person who gets into a state school, wants to stay in state, but Emory costs much, much more, right? The other Emory problem that we get into, and this is where your Sidley experience is interesting, is that the person gets into Emory, wants to go to Big Law. Emory is actually the cheaper school, but they also got into Duke.
And we're always
and you're like, well, do you pay a premium for Duke over Emory if all you want to do is go to Big Law? So I don't know why Joe put you on the spot right now, because that was all that's all him on his little computer machine. But I don't.
Well, no, she said this was her mission for the day, was to defend.
And Joe, I
Emory.
meant to say I love your sound effects. So when I try to
we haven't done any
for some
today.
applause or laughs. No, they're gone.
Yeah. I totally blanked on those today. All right.
They're so cheesy and bad. Defend your boy. Defend Emery.
We don't have them on my podcast, so I don't know. We need to work on it.
We didn't for a long time. I had to really look around to find this.
Because, Ellen, you have what's called self-respect.
It's questionable. No. Okay, that's why. Good. We'll go with that.
All right. Defend Emery.
So yes, okay. So what? So am I defending Emery? Is that the where we're going? Yeah. No. I had some amazing professors. They were brilliant and funny. And for me, a big part of it was I wanted to be in the I chose to be in the South. So I grew up in this really tiny town in New Mexico. I grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where my dad was a nuclear engineer for the laboratory there. But all of my extended family was from the Deep South, and they had the accent and ate fried green tomatoes. And so I went to Berkeley for undergrad only because technically the Los Alamos National Laboratory used to be run by the University of California, so I got in-state tuition, and it was really convenient and cheap. And then I was like, I want to kind of explore my roots. So I mean, a big part was I wanted to see the South and be near my family, and I did it. And then I was like, okay, that's good. I'll go back to California. No, I miss it, but I decided not to live there for real. But I took it as an opportunity to explore that part of our country.
It's impressive that you took your graduate degree to do that, right? Because people usually do it the other way around. They're going to explore. They're going to explore for college, and then they're going to go to graduate school. Well, for law school, you're going to go best place to get into. For graduate school, you're going to go for whatever.
I mean, I see the logic. That probably makes more sense. But once you get a job, you're kind of tight. I don't know. I also studied abroad a lot. So I studied in Russia in undergrad, and then I went to Ireland in law school. And that was probably I went during my last year, and I didn't have a job lined up. And I think that was probably not something. If I had called in, I think you guys would have strongly recommended against studying abroad in law school. But
Fair enough. Hey, but no, studying in Russia probably today, that's actually important for law. So anyway, because they run everything now. So thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
This was horrifying.
No, well, I mean,
Ellen, you were great.
Yeah,
when we talked about it.
Well, I mean, you should check out I Want to Put a Baby in You, where we tell the personal story. And let me give one quick pitch before you
Absolutely.
So, one of our upcoming episodes is in fact a partner at a big law firm who divorced at 35 and still wanted to have kids and chose to go the sperm donor route, and then kind of found out that her sperm donor had donated, all these other people had used his sperm, and now has this community where her kids have what they call diblings, which are donor siblings. So they know some of these half siblings, and kind of had made a community and a family. And I know that you're thinking a lot of this sounds weird, but it's actually touching and amazing, and that there's all kinds of families out there, and she's good. So listen up for her coming up.
This is a very special
I Want to Put a Baby in You.
This is a very special episode of Big Love at this point.
Yeah, Ellie's not doing too well with this, but no, yes. Thank you. Everyone should check out I Want to Put a Baby in You. You should read the weekly columns at Above the Law. Thank you so much, Ellen Trachman. And
Thanks,
thank you,
guys.
everybody, for listening to the show, because you're the people who make this happen. You should give us reviews, not just give us stars, though those are good too, but give us write out the full review. That helps. It improves the algorithm, and then more people can listen. You should read Above the Law. Generally, you should follow Elie at Elie NYC. Remember to tweet at him whether he should talk about Haiti or Scaredy Squirrel. I'm at Joseph Patrice, and I think that sums up everything I have to do. So,
That's a wrap.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. You can also find us at AboveTheLaw.com, ATLRedline.com, iTunes, RSS, Twitter, and Facebook. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.